Good day and welcome. I'm Joey and this is Orange 20. Today we're going to be talking about using a session 0 in your RPGs. This is a game session where everyone meets up prior to the first time you are going to play to discuss the game together, to build your characters, and to prepare for the first time you're actually going to play. When I first started playing, back in the distant and long ago 1980s, they weren't that common. Although, to be fair, I didn't actually learn to play RPGs from anyone else. I started with a copy of the Red Basic D&D books, which you could take out from the public library. My small hometown was so against reading, nobody had gone into the library to see the Evil Devil game was there, and kids hadn't realized it was full of neat dice, so they were all still in the little plastic bag the library kept the books in. So maybe other groups were doing this all along, but I first came across the concept a little later on. So let's begin by talking about why you're doing this. The idea is to create cohesion. The whole game is about building a shared world with the players and the game master, and this helps make everything more consistent from the very start. So I invite everyone in, have them sit around the table, set out the books, and after everyone is settled, I tend to remind them what the starting hook is. You're all going to be starting in Basiltan, a small mining town on the edge of the kingdom. When the mine is overrun, Lord Basil comes looking for volunteers to push out the goblins. You're willing to join, for one reason or another. A problem my games used to have was finding a reason for everyone to come together for the first adventure. I just let people bring whatever character they wanted to play to the table, and then I had to struggle to find ways to bring them into the story, because I didn't want to step on their feet creatively. But we are all at the table to play together, so now I make it the responsibility of my players to come up with somebody who wants to play. I use a prompt to help share that responsibility. If you have made a character that doesn't want to go into the mines before we start, I can have the conversation with you. So, why is your character adventuring? Generally, you can find something. Maybe they don't want to go into the mines, but someone they care about is a prisoner of the goblins. Basically, it makes it so that before we even begin, everyone's going to agree to go on that first adventure. When they do, the group will start to come together, start to work together, and it's generally easier to explain after the first adventure why they keep working together. So I like to have it built into the characters that they're going to go on that first adventure. The next step is just letting the players go. Some players will likely come to the table with a character they want to play. This won't be everyone, but generally there will be a couple of people with a character concept that they've been dying to try. When I get invited to go play in a game instead of run one, I'm usually that sort of person. If you invited me to your table to play D&D today, I would first pitch Albrecht Loder, a dwarven fighter with the guild merchant background, who is an armorsmith looking to find gems to decorate a suit of ceremonial armor he is constructing, to try and turn the head of his guild master's daughter. I already know a lot about who Albrecht is, and I could give you pages and pages on it. But if you remember from last episode, I think that's for me, and I won't force anyone else to read that. Like most of the people who come to the table with a strong character concept in mind, I can't wait to pitch this to the group, to see if the dungeon master and the other players like the idea. As a DM, there will be in most groups of 6 usually 2 or 3 people who show up with a concept like this. They generally start to inspire the other characters. Some people will want to make a complementary character. Can I be the gnomish rogue who took Albrecht under his wing and who preys on his trust and lack of knowledge on the outside world? Other people will look at the group and say, well, we don't have any magic users yet. I'll make a wizard or something who's been hired to research where he might find the gems he's looking for. The biggest issue that tends to come up is finding a way to bridge those multiple strong character concepts. If you end up with 2 camps, one half of the group built around the dwarven jeweler fighter and the other half built around the paladin of light, the group needs to find a reason why these 2 camps will come together. Maybe they're going to meet on the way to the mine and they're just both independently going to go on the first adventure, and it's up to them on the adventure to find a reason to stick together. Or maybe the player who wants to be the gem researching wizard says, my character can be Sir Pavalier's sister. In my experience, most session zeros go like this. The characters start finding reasons and connections between characters, whether they're based on their adventuring history, based on their backstory, or if they start putting together relationships that aren't part of basically what you'd normally think of when you build a character, but you end up with a lot of family members, a lot of people who have a long history together, people who grew up together, and they find a reason why they can work together just based on the opportunity, just based on being asked. The next step is adjusting. First, let's talk about this from the player perspective. Maybe I pitch my dwarf fighter and you say, well, the thing about dwarves in this setting, anyone who leaves the stronghold is generally an outcast and won't be welcomed back. This information is important to know before I've finished rolling up my character. I might say, can I have special permission and I'll be allowed back in? Everyone may think I'm an outcast, but if I go back to my stronghold, they know I was allowed to leave and I have a special exception. The idea behind a compromise like this is I don't expect the rest of the game world to understand. Everyone knows dwarves are outcasts and I've agreed to move beyond the stronghold, so I'm expected to be treated as an outcast for the whole game, and I'm going to move into the game knowing that. I know that things change when I complete my personal quest, but I also understand what's going to happen to my character in the world, and it's going to change it from a world where dwarven merchants roam human kingdoms. In that world, I might be an upstanding citizen. Now I have to deal with the fact that everyone thinks I'm some sort of thief or scoundrel that was thrown out of my home. Maybe my suggestion of being allowed back in just doesn't work for how you see dwarves. So I could decide maybe Albrecht snuck out, and he plans to find his way back in later because he needs to win his love's hand, and he'll try anything, but he's worried time is short and that other suitors might be on the prowl. Maybe your setting just doesn't work for this adventure concept, so I might decide to do something similar but different. Maybe I'm not trying to impress an upstanding dwarf, but another outcast, and we're both part of the world beyond. Importantly, all the other players also get to hear how your world views dwarves. They know a bit more about how they should feel about any dwarf they meet, and they might be more or less interested in playing that type of character. Maybe the gnome rogue who wanted to be a slightly surly guide to the world decides that his rogue should instead be a dwarf because he loves the idea of being an outcast. Instead of conceptually, I might decide to adjust Albrecht mechanically. Maybe the other players have decided they're going to play a barbarian, a ranger, and a monk, and I'm worried the group won't have enough healing. So I decide that instead of a fighter, Albrecht is a crusading cleric of Phantom, the dwarven god of lost treasures, and I'm planning to bring back gems stolen from raids long ago, to put them into my ceremonial armor which I am forging, in hopes of impressing the High Priest's daughter. Alternatively, after hearing what the other characters are playing, or learning about the dwarven outcasts, I might just decide I want to play a completely different character. I find most people who show up with a strong concept usually have more than one. So as the conversation goes on and everyone is looking at playing a wood elf ranger, a half-orc barbarian, a high elf paladin of the ancients, and a half-elf druid, I may decide that my dwarf fighter is a poor fit for that group. Instead, I may switch to one of my other concepts. I may choose to play Nalia Ithendrel, my Eladrin wizardress noble who adventures out of boredom, just looking to see more of the world in hopes of feeling something again. When everyone makes their characters in a vacuum, we don't worry about how they fit in the world together. Session 0 gives everyone a chance to adjust and to put in predefined relationships. Nalia has known the druid and the ranger for years, as they guard the entrance to the Feywild and the city she comes from, so she just chooses to travel with them when she wanders beyond into the greater world. If I'm in the Dungeon Master chair, I'm listening to all the back and forth and interjecting information about the world, correcting any assumptions if my world is a little bit different than the one the players are expecting. My world doesn't actually have the Feywild as an alternate dimension, so there's no gates. You're just from a deep part of the primordial woods where magic is more common. As you listen, you should start to get inspiration for later adventures. In a future episode, I'm going to get more into how tabletop can lead to what you change in your adventure, but the idea here is you're going to find out what your players are looking for and what they want to hear. You're hearing what's important to their characters, who they care about, and what they might want to see. The next step is, after all the concepts are in, everyone is ready to start making their characters. I find most of the time when you have brand new players, there are usually a few experienced players there as well. I often rely on them to help the newbies build their characters and try to build the newest characters first, because the experienced players can finish up on their own as need be. I also really like having people from a different table who join mine come in a session 0. So with D&D as our example system, you can set out what stat generation method you're using, bring up if feats or multiclassing are allowed in your game, and go over any table rules. Feats and multiclassing are technically optional rules, and I really tend to leave those two out when I've got too many brand new players in a game. You're going to find you almost never have enough core books to have everyone build their characters all at once. People will generally need to take turns. While this is happening, people generally keep discussing their characters, and the time isn't wasted. The new players will ask for advice, go over their options with the more experienced players, and the more experienced players will excitedly tell the new players why they're making some of the decisions they're making as they build their character. Remember, what a player chooses for their character at character generation is a vote about what they want to see. When someone takes athletics, they want to see their character running, climbing, jumping, swimming in the game. When someone takes deception, they are looking for opportunities to lie. When they take a gambling set proficiency, they want their character to have a chance to earn some cash in a seedy tavern throwing some weighted dice. One of the things I find as a newer game master is some people want to make sure the challenges are hard enough to challenge the players. While this is important, it's also important to see the characters succeed in their elements. You should put in some jumps that the barbarian will almost certainly make. You should let the bard lie to everyone in the bar until the paranoid sheriff shows up at the end of the night because the bard pushed their luck too far. They should be able to pull a fast one on a lot of people in the world. Not everyone, but enough that they feel that the points they put into the deception skill were a worthwhile investment. I also mention this because at character creation, if you're not planning to have a lot of social interaction in your game because you're doing a mega dungeon that just has hack and slash, kick down the door all the way down, it's worth mentioning this to the character who takes nothing but social skills. You might want to mention, hey, there's not going to be a lot of opportunities to use those in this game. You might want to look at more survival and athletics type skills. When I talk about making characters at the table, this is a little bit system dependent. One of the first games I owned was the Palladium Fantasy role-playing game. As you can see from this book, it's been on a few adventures itself. One of the things about this game is the character creation is very complex. Generally, it takes at least an hour to make a character, longer if you've got magic or psionics. There are still games that are rule heavy like this, that have really involved character creation. Like GURPS, or Mutants and Masterminds. If you're playing a game with a high level of crunch is when there's a lot of rule content and a lot of fiddly little bits. The advice I've given for Session 0 still works, but you might need to make the characters away from the table. They can take a lot of time, and it may not work to have everyone sit together while each person spends an hour with the book on their individual character. For new players, when I'm dealing with a game that's this crunchy, I tend to use a more guided process. In a game like D&D, as they're making their decisions, you can just talk through what the rules represent, especially if you're not talking in a rule-based format. So when someone's making a rose, for example, I would say, what are the 2 things you never fail at? Is it picking locks, convincing someone when you lie, quietly slipping through the shadows, or running across rooftops? This will make more sense to someone learning the game than saying, pick 2 of your skills or your Thieves' Tool proficiency and you get double your proficiency bonus whenever you make that roll. It can take a little bit of mental work to reframe what the rules represent, but they were always intended to be an abstraction of something like this, and it really helps new players if you can phrase it in those terms. In a game that's really crunchy, I'll often ask players the questions I need to make a character for them. I used to do this a lot in my Palladium days. I asked them, okay, what is your character really, really good at? What does your character need help with? When your character is being awesome, what do they look like? What do they do? I'll ask them kind of all the pertinent questions about how they want to interact in the game world, so it can depend on the game itself. Going back to the Palladium example, does your character use magic at all? And if they tell me, no, I'm a fighter. Okay, did you teach yourself, or did you get a lot of formal training? Oh, I taught myself. Okay, so you didn't do a lot to prepare beforehand, but you learn really, really quickly. Yep, yeah, I do. Okay, and when you're not fighting, what does your character do? Like, do they have any hobbies? This conversation could go on for quite a while in a crunchy game. Crunchy games can go deep, often stupid deep. For Palladium, you're choosing 20 or 30 individual skills, and some of them are very, very specific. For something like GURPS, there's a lot of differentiation between different skills that do slightly different things. If you're running the game, you probably have a pretty good idea of how the system works. So you get the concept from the character, take it away, and build them a good character that will do the things they want to do. Also, you should be willing to adjust any choices you made on their behalf. I tend to do this for people who have built their character on their own as well, but especially for a new character who thought they wanted to do something, haven't been doing a lot, and wants to trade out especially a few of their lesser skills. First level Dungeons & Dragons tends to assume characters are at the very start of their adventuring career. If the game you're playing assumes more experienced characters, or if you're playing D&D and starting above level 1, I want to recommend an awesome thing I steal from the character creation in Spirit of the Century. I ask each player to write a 1 or 2 sentence synopsis of one of their previous adventures. Nalia ventured deep into the Yuntai temple and stole the idol of Soralvas. It turned out not to be magic, but she sold it for a tidy profit. Then everyone takes that sheet where they wrote their adventure and passes it one to the right. They then add a sentence on how they contributed to the adventure now in front of them. So I might get my sheet back and it says, Silas the Rogue barely managed to sneak them past the traps in the temple. Then you pass the sheet the other way, and someone might add, Gravash the Barbarian barely managed to kill the great snake with a desperate blow from her great axe. The beauty of this is each character is now connected to 2 other characters. They've all done something together, and there's a web all around the table so everyone is connected. Lots of players will start to fill in more details from these adventures as they remind each other of that time through play. So they'll talk about, hey, remember at the temple we saw a trap like this? Even if you didn't go into all the detail, it explains why you're not starting at level 1, or in games where characters don't start at the first day they go adventuring, what they did before these adventures started. I used to tend to bring Quick Encounter to session 0, just in case, but I find it usually takes up the whole time. Like this video. Is it running long? You know it never runs too long? True son of the Empire. Some people say this book is too short. Are they right? You better buy a copy and find out, and help support this episode. Now let's do all the YouTube things. You should subscribe. You should like. And if you didn't like this video, remember, I'm personally offended when I see a thumbs up, so you should press that button to make me real mad. Leave me a comment with any questions or concerns you might have. Also, I'm supposed to tell you about the bell, I guess, from what I've seen other people do. Now I'm going to sit here staring at the camera and smiling, so maybe YouTube will give me a thumbnail where it doesn't look like someone has been draining my intelligence stats since 3rd edition. Oh, stupid face.